This podcast is brought to you by Spirits and Distilling for those who make and drink great spirits. Join our free email newsletter for technical and creative distilling stories in your inbox every week. Learn more at spiritsanddistilling.com.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Spirits and Distilling podcast. My name is Sydney Jones. I am your host today. We are on episode number 24 of this season, episode number 46 total. And today I am with my good friend Owen Martin. He is the master distiller of Angel's Envy. I am particularly jazzed about this podcast because normally when I'm recording these things, I am doing it remote. I'm on my laptop. I'm talking to someone through a screen, but Owen is here in my living room right now. We're drinking whiskey and coffee together, as you do at 7:30 at night. Totally normal behavior. But Owen is fantastic. He has been in residency at Angel's Envy as master distiller for about 3 years now. And he has an incredible craft distilling background, very similar to kind of the path that I took. So when we first met a couple of years ago at the Kentucky Bourbon Festival, I feel like we kicked it off pretty instantaneously, I would say.
Kindred spirits
for sure. But before we get into all of that, important reminder, as always, that G&D Chillers understands that each distillery's chilling requirements are unique. On every distillery project, G&D offers the front-end design and engineering your team needs at no cost to you. Hank Presley, head distiller at Moondrop Distillery, says, "Early on, we made a decision to partner with quality American-made companies. One of those companies was G&D Chillers, and we are proud of that choice. Our equipment from them has run long and strong. We put our first barrel in our rick house in September 2021, and over the past 3 years, we have put back another 540 barrels. What a great decision to team up with a company like G&D Chillers. Reach out for a quote today at gdchillers.com. Owen, so happy that you're here in my living room. And he came bearing gifts, which is also very exciting. I'm drinking some Snowflake from Stranahan's, which I've never had the pleasure of getting one of these bottles before. I've tried a sample of it, which was pretty cool, and was like the one claim to fame that I had with a Stranahan's limited bottling. But this is my first bottle of Snowflake, and you brought it to my house, so thank you.
Yeah, I think that was a fun one. That was my first year, my first crack at it, and I think it actually laid a decent amount of the groundwork of where we've kind of gone with Angel's Envy now in terms of product development and that sort of thing. But yeah, anyway, join a privilege to be here sipping coffee and whiskey in your living room.
So I know Snowflake, each bottling is unique and different, like a snowflake.
Correct.
Tell me what's going on in this particular one that I'm sipping on, which is phenomenal, by the way.
That one is heavily apple brandy finished, 2 types of apple brandy. And forgive me because this was now over 5 years ago. So my brain only holds so much memory.
And it was 2020 as well, and we just all forget that year.
Yeah, exactly.
Dumpster fire of the year.
But yeah, it was a little bit of Calvados and then a little bit of New York Applejack. So the idea of using similar finishing casks that bring different things to the equation and then layering on each other. Which again, I think there's a lot of Angel's Envy that in the last year or so have sort of built upon that idea.
So, Owen, for our listeners who might not be familiar with your career, I'm sure they're familiar with Angel's Envy because, who the fuck isn't, you know? Mm-hmm. Can you give our listeners a little bit of background on you and kind of where your career has taken you and how you have arrived in Kentucky?
Sure. I have to do this elevator pitch enough. I'm always trying to think of different angles to do it now.
I know. I have it reharsed in my head for when people ask me the same question.
Yes. I mean, you get pretty good at it. So I'll take maybe a little bit different approach. Let's go geographically. I did Kansas City to Scotland, Scotland to Arkansas, Arkansas to Colorado, Colorado to Kentucky. And then work-wise, I went mechanical engineering to craft beer to Scotch whiskey to American craft whiskey, to progressively larger places, mostly single malt oriented, and then on to Kentucky bourbon.
So the big transition that struck me the most is that you went from, working for Stranahan's, making this quintessential American single malt that I think is one of the big brands that really put it on the map for people who didn't understand what American single malt was. before it was legally defined, before it really started to make its sojourn west to east. And then you went to like the preeminent finisher, like Angel's Envy pioneered American bourbon finishing in this country. Tell me about that flippity flop.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense when you look at single malt at its core, or I guess maybe more lineage-wise to Scotland and Ireland, right? Like I say, having done my master's in Scotland and learned my whiskey making techniques largely there, that's what's been imparted on the whiskey that I'm making stateside. And so even though Angel's Envy was the one that really brought cask finishing to the forefront in American whiskey, it is something that's existed, I want to say, since the early 90s or so in Scotch whiskey. Balvenie, I think, is usually credited with it. But even, Macallan and sherry barrels going back hundreds of years. So for me, it's always just been a tool that I had learned of, hey, it's in my whiskey making tool set. If you want to make a type of whiskey this way, that way, like it's something that you can pull out and do. And so usually I say, like, by the end of my 6.5-ish years at Stranahan's, my title was head distiller and production manager, but functionally what I was acting as was basically the blender, product developer, and production manager. And so a lot of what I was doing was cask finishing releases, including the Snowflakes. And so I think that's what caught the attention of Angel's Envy, or at least brought me into the fold of being able to interview for that job. And so even though the base whiskeys changed, granted, I did make bourbon and rye for a couple years at the first distillery I moved to when I moved back to the States. But really that's the parallel over, is because single malt's always been more agreeable to finishing, or more, I guess, open to the idea. I would say cask finishing with bourbon was kind of maybe a little bit different in the last couple of years when I think it's kind of gained common acceptance, but, fairly heavily debated topic. They'll just leave it at that of, will they, won't they, what should be done in bourbon. But that's the parallel over. And so now I'm applying a lot of what I've either learned in Scotland or put into usage in the craft distilleries I've worked at to play in Kentucky on a larger scale. So
from what you learned in Scotland, working over there, you studied at Harriet Watt, very similar to Molly, who's the other host of this podcast. Taking that and applying that stateside, Scotch whiskey making is so different than American whiskey making. Mm-hmm. What was the biggest transition from that as well? Because in my mind, your career has had all of these really cool jumps, but you've made it look very seamless as an outsider looking in. But I know that might not always be the case.
Yeah, you're probably uniquely qualified to say that. A lot of people are like, wow, you really knew what you were doing. And I'm like, man, I've just stumbled my shit from one thing to the next. And it always seems like it makes sense. But really, I'm just trying to work hard at the task at hand. And I look up and another door's open that wasn't open before.
Amen, sister.
I would say, quick Molly story. I think I met Molly in passing along with a few of her cohort the year before me at Harriet Watt. They're in a park in the Meadows having just graduated, and I was brand new to Scotland. I had no idea what was going on. They're very kind to invite me to pretty much their going away party. And we were drinking like the nicest Belgian beer in the world out of plastic cups, just being degenerates in a park. So I'll have to see if she remembers that, because it's a very happy memory of mine of kicking into my time in Scotland.
That sounds so idyllic and nice.
Yeah, Scotland has those moments. But anyway, I got off topic. What was the question?
Transitioning from Scotch whiskey making to American, with all the nuances and production differences there.
Yeah, I think it's, I would say mostly in terms of cask management and just how radically different that is. I think the base whiskey making, I mean, you could talk on grain, off grain types of grain, but like,
and that's where my mind would go, honestly, is the cereal grain availability and lautering versus not and whatever else. Yeah, that's automatically what I assume, but cask management hadn't been something that I considered.
I think, yeah, no doubt. The way the grains are treated, the type of grain, and how that results in your production techniques is absolutely different. But I think, to me, the bigger difference is in casks, especially if you're talking about bourbon, right? I mean, just the power of a new oak barrel versus them using barrels essentially until they fall apart. It's just a very different way of looking at things. When I'm explaining whiskey to people that, are newer to their journey, I usually just say, like, look, if you look at whiskey as a whole, right, the umbrella category of all grains, that if you put grain as one point in space and you put oak and barrel as another point and drew a line between those two, that all your whiskeys in the whole world are going to fall somewhere along those lines. And it just depends on what country and what the regulations are. And clearly American whiskey very much more on the oak end, whereas I would say most other global whiskeys on the grain side. But I mean, yeah. And also, I mean, I should probably note, I never professionally made Scotch whiskey. I worked with a lowlands distillery as part of my master's thesis, a very unsexy thesis of isolating protein out of spent grain and just working with pot ale, essentially stillage, very dirty in the basement of the engineering building. And meanwhile, my friends are making their own gin recipes and brewery business plans, and I'm just covered in muck as it slowly gets more sour and more sour.
Hey, respect. A lot of my day-to-day work conversations revolve around stillage.
Yeah. So I did that. That was back when I at least was holding on to the thought that I might do a little bit more with my engineering degree than I ended up doing. But yeah, I guess I would say the parallels, like I said at kind of the last topic, cask finishing, but just how those cask finishes impart themselves on a new oak barrel, like, you know, and could potentially fight, especially with red wine, which is what we deal with day in, day out at Angel's Envy. You got to be careful. Whereas I think it's a little bit more forgiving. Maybe the Scotch would disagree with me, but a little bit more forgiving when you're using a lighter base spirit or one that's more based on used cooperage.
Interesting. So since coming to Angel's Envy, which is for a long time is just a distillery that I associated with port finish and rum finish.
Correct.
And that's all I thought about with Angel's Envy. And arguably it wasn't a brand that I was attracted to for a long time, because finishes were not really in my rotation of drinkers. Mm-hmm. And then you come on the scene, and there has been a slew of new products, including the first unfinished whiskey that Angel's Envy has put out.
Yeah, I think that's why I was brought on the scene. Uh-huh. And again, I think that goes to more of a craft root background of make a bunch of different, for good or bad, right? Shotgun approach, just shoot it all at the wall, see what happens, which I'm not saying is the right way. But since I have more of a background in making new releases fairly quickly at various scales, I think that's kind of the skill set I brought to the table. But yeah, it definitely caught the marketing team by surprise when I was hired on as the cask finishing guy, and then was like, no, guys.
We're just going to nix that.
No, guys, bottle and bond. That's what we're doing, guys. So, I mean, one of many other things that I've come out with, most of those are finished, right? We've now done our second unfinished bourbon. It's something that I want to have the door open for, but I mean, clearly we are a cask finished brand and we'll continue to be that. I just don't want to be the ones limiting ourselves of what we can or can't do.
Yeah. It's arguably the bottled and bond specifically, I think, is my most favorite thing that I've ever tried from Angel's Envy. So like hats off to you, because it's an incredible whiskey and you did witchcraft to make it, which I love.
Hey, anytime witchcraft can be involved in sentences with me, I'm on board with, you know.
So for those who might be tuning in, can you please explain how you did a cask strength bottled in bond?
Yeah. Well, I have to shout this out off the bat, because as much as I would love to say it was my idea, it was not. It was an idea of our founders, Lincoln Henderson. So to me, to be able to execute an idea of our founders is just as cool as being able to say it was my idea, as much as I wish I could. But what I don't know, because he passed away in 2013, was quite how they had intended on pulling it off. And frankly, I've been told that he didn't want it to be an Angel's Envy product. So I think my contributions to it were doing the witchcraft of the blending, but also the big push that it absolutely should be an Angel's Envy product. So it'll go back to, again, saying that I've always viewed finishing is just a technique that you use as a whiskey maker, and that it's a technique from more of European whiskey making that was applied to bourbon, right? So the idea that you're marrying things between categories. And to me, big on the wall of Angel's Envy, if you drive by the highway in Louisville, it says revere tradition, embrace progress. And to me, that's what always has resonated of what Angel's Envy should be. Again, we just talked about cask finishing is a big piece of that. And the idea that it's, you know, again, pushing these ideas that we can look and learn from cognac, tequila, wine industry, Scotch industry. And so for this, my pitch, or how I was able to kind of get it approved as an Angel's Envy product, was you got Bottle and Bond from 1897. Don't have to tell you, Heaven Hill. And
we do be loving our Bottled and Bond.
You own it, guys. And then you got cask strength, which I wouldn't say is exactly new, but I would say is damn near peak popularity. I mean, who knows what the next 10, 15 years, but certainly in my view, kind of modern in its popularity.
It's the buzzword that people
exactly.
are attracted to.
Hazmat. No, we don't have to go there. But basically, the idea that we were blending ideas in bourbon, right? Not between categories, but within a category. And I phrased it as that. And that to me meant it was Angel's Envy, was that we were looking within a category and taking ideas that had not been combined. And that's why it should be a product in our portfolio. But to actually answer your question and the witchcraft bits of it, the root of it is a low entry proof. And having seen, or at least just read the details on your 90th anniversary, I'm sure you have some acquaintance with how entry proof, even at the exact same grain bill, can make a wildly different whiskey.
Huge. And I prefer personally a lower barrel entry proof. I understand the cost benefits of doing a higher entry proof because barrels are expensive. They are not cheap, but you get so much more cool solubles out with higher water content.
Barrels are expensive. Warehousing space, once you start talking about on the millions of barrel scales or hundreds of 20% more barrels because of a lower entry proof becomes a rapidly unrealistic thing. I mean, I will say I don't mind. We do just under 125, so 124.7 is typically what we shoot for. I don't mind that higher barrel entry proof with that because most of what we're doing is port finishing. So I don't mind pulling out more tannin, more oak, because we're going to soften it eventually, most likely with a wine finish. But this is perfect for an unfinished one because, again, all the reasons you just said, like a softer, more rounded, sweeter whiskey doesn't necessarily need a finishing aspect to it. So 103 entry proof, right? And then basically from there, I kind of, as we launch this and educating around that, everybody knows Angel Share, and everyone is an idea that it's mostly driven by the amount of heat. So normally with these sort of things, I reference Scotland and Colorado as my two endpoints, with Kentucky falling in the middle. So from a heat or evaporation standpoint, Scotch Irish whiskey losing 2 or 3% a year. Colorado, we could lose 9%, 8 or 9%.
Down in Florida, I was losing 10% a year.
And in my counterparts in Mexico and Puerto Rico for rum, teens.
It's bullshit.
Easy,
I mean, it's necessary. It makes for a better tasting spirit. But like when you are a small craft guy and you're like, oh my God, I'm losing 10% a year.
Well, even seeing like some of the Texas producers make larger barrels, I really like that.
Yeah, so shout out to the licorice family.
People reacting to their environments and then letting their techniques kind of be shaped by that. I love it. So basically those is the end. And then Kentucky, as we all say, about 5% a year or so. But then what I think a lot of people don't realize, probably less so your listeners, I think they might know that, but humidity, right, being a huge thing that affects that, right? Heat's going to affect how much you lose. Humidity is going to affect what ratio you lose it in. So then referencing that Scotland, pretty much unanimously, all the barrels go down in proof. Pretty much every barrel I made in Colorado would go up. Even the humidified warehouses at best would typically hold flat.
Yeah, we would see it a little bit in Florida. Yeah, we were really close to a river, and Florida is just a fucking swamp.
Yep. So then having those, yes, right. So, swampy environment is all right. So then kind of I go back and reference Kentucky as the midpoint between those, where the top floors of our rick houses will behave in a Colorado way and go up in proof, and the bottom floors of our rick houses, or our palletized warehouses for that matter, tend to go down in proof. So long-winded way of saying 103 entry proof, and then I think you can probably see where I'm going, where bottom levels of palletized warehouse or bottom levels our rick house, where we knew it was going to go down in proof. What I don't know, because I can't ask our founder because he's not around, was the intention to remove it directly when that 103 had dropped to 100? I don't know. And I don't love that anyway, because that's not a flavor-driven decision. Mm-hmm. But it really ultimately didn't matter, because by the time I got my feet under me in Kentucky and understood what some of the projects that had been laid down, where our very first batch was from 2018, this current national batch was from 2019, the barrels were at like 97, 98 proof. So not bottle and bond, right? One distillery, one distilling season, minimum 4 years. No added color or flavor, importantly, which to me read couldn't legally be cask finished. Since that time, I've seen multiple cask finished bottle and bonds approved by the government. So what the hell do I know?
It depends on what TTB agent you get that reviews your label.
Too real. It's too real. But anyway, I wouldn't have wanted to do it anyway. It was the opportunity for us to do a bottle and bond in a way that was historic, but a way that was doing it differently. So anyway, but back to the one distillery, one distilling season thing. Nothing precludes you from blending all your barrels together. So what do we have 99.9% of our inventory that's at 124.7 entry proof. So then I was able to get it to around 6 years, which to me felt like the profile of the low entry proofs had reached maturity or the level I was looking for. And then it just became a math equation, which was basically 98x plus 122y equals 100x plus y, and then start fiddling around. So the very first batch, which was distillery only, was 27 low proof barrels, 2 high proof barrels. We hit 100 to the 1,000th place on the Anton Par, which I've only seen a few times in my career.
Witchcraft.
Yeah. And I have the picture. I always offer to show it to people that don't believe me. But, again, I've seen it a handful of times. As you know, 0.6 on either side. Our in-house specs even a little bit tighter than that. But we literally had like distillers running down the hallways, like shouting. It was a very joyful moment. Tiny
Tim went out into the street and like declared it's Christmas Day.
Newspapers were being shook at people. So anyway, I mean, obviously since that time, we've scaled it. So what you have at your house is the national release, which launched, I think, in September. Most places I've gone to in the last month or so have been pretty close to selling out, but our intention is to probably release it once or twice a year when we have the inventory to do so. And so this last batch, I think, ended up being like 375 barrels. So I have to remind myself when we do these projects that are super cool and unique, that I'm the one who's got to continue to make them. So, yeah.
With this kind of project then, as you're scaling it up and you were looking for, cask strength 100 proof, in terms of flavor differences per batch, are you seeing a variance olfactory wise?
Yes, absolutely. I would say the very first batch had a lot more peach, stone fruit, that sort of thing, whereas the current national batch, I actually think is the best one we've done so far, because we've done another couple small ones that were distillery only to carry it through the first year. This one has much more of like a, I'd say like nutter butter, like candied, nutty flavor to it. It has a little bit of fruit too as well. But, obviously as a whiskey maker or a blender to some extent, the goal is to make releases that taste similar. I think with bonded, we're allowed a little bit, well, not allowed. I mean, literally you can only, your hands are tied in a very real sense of what you can or can't blend. So I can't be like, well, shit, this isn't as oaky as the last batch. Let me blend in some 8-year-old stuff, or man, I need to really like make this a little bit more neutral. Well, let me look at some other barrels I got. So I think I at least view it for myself that I'm allowed a little bit more leeway batch to batch for variance. But that being said, still trying to make it as similar as possible. I mean, and this is a specifically nerdy product, but I think it's a good example of anytime you scale something, how do you approach things differently from an inventory management standpoint or blending standpoint or even distilling standpoint. And so, whereas the first few batches, we taste every single barrel multiple times through, only the best of the best get in. That becomes very quickly unrealistic when you start talking about batches in the hundreds of barrels range. So then we kind of more aggregate lot codes. So typically each of our fermenters is going to yield about 40 to 45 barrels. And so I'll taste usually, my safest route is I usually do 2 different polls from a lot code. I probably should even do more than that and just check that the proof is similar and the sensory is similar. And if that's the case, then I extrapolate that to the whole lot code. And then I blend with those to make the overall batch right on a lab scale. And then kind of back it up from there.
Yeah. It's an interesting, premise. We talk so much about, blending to a specific product's standard, but blending for proof is definitely a new one. It's fascinating.
I remember when I first was sitting there looking at our inventory, I probably had only worked for the company for a few months at that point and was looking at, a few other projects we had one that said high corn bourbon. I was like, what the hell is that? Later on, yeah, I was like, oops, all corn. It was close to it. It was 90% corn, 10% malt. Cause when the distiller actually accidentally puts corn in the rye silo,
I just side note, love that, and you'll hear it here first. So often at these like limited releases that your legacy guys do, they're whoopsie poos.
Yeah. And I think it's okay to admit that too. The one I dislike is the lost barrel thing. There's always truth to it to some extent, but I find that most of the places that I see do the lost barrel. It was lost. And I'm like, yeah.
You're doing really poor warehousing management.
That's best case, or it's just marketing.
The TTB would be really pissed off at you.
Yeah. So it's always, as somebody who has now found themselves in the sort of storytelling space, or at least I'm developing some of the stories we're telling as I develop the whiskey, right, concurrently. I like to think my bullshit radar is kind of there of like, well, I don't know about that. But yes, certainly any, Burai and grain bill things, like I think the nice thing is somebody who worked for a little bit in the beer industry is if you mess up your beer, it's probably going down the drain. But if you mess up a bourbon, a whiskey, you put in a barrel and see where you end up 5+ years later, and hope it's good.
And it could be incredible.
Yeah. So we got the 2 grain one. So that was another rebrand on my part. The 90% corn, 10% malt became a 2 grain bourbon. And we actually launched that as one of the follow-ups to the Bonded. So our second, as part of our second distillery exclusive release.
I don't think I've tried that one.
I thought about bringing it, and then I brought the peated one instead. But we actually did those as a double release. So it was a pretty fun 1-2 punch.
Well, that's a great entry point to the peated whiskey that you brought me. You guys went from port finish and rum finish, 2 of the more accessible finishes, to peat.
Yep. I made that one for me, or at least I laid that down for me. I knew, well, I guess this is a good one to talk about just in terms of how a product becomes what it is.
And I'm intrigued because I've never worked with a peat finish as well. So I wouldn't even know how to analyze those barrels in terms of do they come listed with parts per billion, or do you just know where you're getting them from? Or how do you quantify those? Because there's so much variance in peated.
Yeah, you know where you're getting it from. Or I hope. I don't know. I can't speak for other people. But I'll go back to what we were talking about right off the bat. I had done a little bit of experimentation with Lefroy quarter casks when I was in Colorado. Not a ton. We'd done it as a one-off thing as part of an event we did. But again, that goes back to us talking about the snowflake is a lot of times it was the proving ground, even if it was on a 1 cask, 2 cask, 8 cask basis of what I could then scale up at Angel's Envy now that we're doing things in the 50, 100, multiple 100 barrel mark. So I'd already done a little bit of proving there. And so, full disclosure, I'm sure everyone here on the podcast know we're owned by Bacardi, right? So I will always collaborate in company if I'm given the opportunity to. If I'm buying a wine cask or a beer cask, clearly that doesn't exist in company, and I'll still buy other brandy casks and whatnot through brokers. But if I have the opportunity to just phone up one of my friends, counterparts at another distillery, and say, "Hey, what's cool? What are you working on? What are you jazzed about?"
It creates brand continuity.
Yeah. Well, and there's the one I usually reference is that we did a tequila finish rye earlier this year, and they were incredibly high-end tequila barrels that, I've done enough work through brokers. I would anticipate it's probably a $600 or $700 barrel. I paid $25 a barrel.
Yeah. And you fully understand what you're getting. There's nothing surprising about it. Yeah.
Yep. And you got full traceability. I know the day it was dumped. I knew where it was stored. I knew the day it was on the water. So there's both a very real financial reason and just a, trust, I guess. And not that we don't trust our brokers, but, again, why not? And so we don't actually have a heavily peated Scotch in the Bacardi portfolio. But what we do have is Dewar's. And so, again, big Scotch nerd over here. But basically phoned up their team and just said, "Hey, you guys trade in pretty much every Isla whiskey out there, right? Can I have some?" And they're like, yeah. And so I said, "Hey, look, we got this Kentucky rye lot of barrels that I think is really exceptional, and particular I think would make a really nice finished whiskey, right? It's not overly spicy. I think it will actually showcase a lot of the finishing barrel characteristics while still having nice, earthy, sweet cinnamon, baked apple is the core of it." And basically listed out all those flavors and said, "Of all the barrels that you guys trade in, what would you suggest?" And it must have been within the day. They're like, I won't say it because it's a different parent company. I'm not worried about getting my hand slapped in company. I just don't want the other company to get mad. But yeah, basically just said, of all the flavors that you just listed off, we think you should do these. And so 50 of them showed up about 2 months later.
How wet were they?
Not wet. I would say it was an ideal scenario for me.
Such an interesting question that only distillers can ask each other.
Mixed feelings on different levels of wetness with barrels. For a spirits barrel, I'm less concerned. I really don't want to work with too wet of wine barrels or beer barrels.
Some people love that, and then I think it just throws off the whole balance.
It's sure one way to get a lot of flavor in there, but yeah, I think there's a lot of other issues that result.
I understand shipping it wet, but I don't always agree with filling it wet.
No, I'll dump out everything that I can. And again, oh man, I'm going to go down all these different avenues. I haven't even answered your first peated question, but Yeah, I tend to break up barrels into sort of three general categories. You have like fermented, so I mean predominantly wine, but beer, cider, that sort of thing. Spirits, right? Everything under the sun, and then double oaking, right, or second oak barrel. And I'll treat each of those three different things differently. A wet barrel, when it comes to spirits, I'm not worried about at all. It's been distilled, it's been barrel aged, whatever. I've been definitely bitten in the ass earlier in my career by like wet beer barrels exchanged with local breweries, and then you pour the whiskey out into a freaking milkshake, and you just can't even filter it because it's don't need to go too far into that. But I learned my lessons on those. So the ideal scenario to me is that a barrel has enough liquid into it to be structurally stable by the time it comes to us, especially when we talk about international shipping. I think general rule of thumb is about 4 liters added for shipping purposes alone. But not wet enough that I'm going to worry about any sediment, or again, from a just philosophical standpoint, I don't need to be adding wine directly into things, although
we're not Canadian.
Yeah. I don't need to hit that 9% or whatever. So yeah, I will try to make sure I'm filling as dry a barrel in that sense as I can. So the peated ones were not, I mean, they didn't leak at all, which is great because the Lefroy ones I got leaked like sieves. But they didn't have like standing liquid in the bottom or anything. But I think notably, and this jive with my experience previously, is that 2 weeks in, all that smoke flavor immediately. But the analogy I like to use when I'm presenting and whatnot is I always joke that I'm searching for a fancier analogy, but it's fit because we just ate some earlier. Finishing and marrying and making whiskey is like making chili, in that it's always better on the second day.
We literally had that debate when you came over. Josh, my husband, made chili for Owen when he came over tonight. And my husband asked, he's like, should I make this tonight or should I like make it the night before so we can get second day chili because it's better? I'm like, yeah, but then the whole house is going to smell like chili and it'll be better for us as we're podcasting because we can smell the chili. We had this legitimate conversation.
Well, now I just have to imagine what that tastes like the next day.
I'll send you home with some. Perfect. It'll be great.
Yeah. See, there's many reasons to come here to do the podcast in person. But,
chili is the big one.
But it's funny because I feel like my team just rolls their eyes at me. But there really is not, in my opinion, there's not a more apt analogy.
Chili and Chinese food, better the second day.
And I've noticed, I've listened to a few of these in preparation for being here. And I was like, Sydney loves an analogy. And I love hearing other whiskey makers' analogies because to me, I think part of our job is we move, or at least speaking for myself, move into kind of a more forward-facing role, is you're there for brand education, right? I mean, I have to be making the whiskey, but I'm also there to educate around why we're making the whiskey or what the whiskey even is. And so I think having met a good amount of my counterparts at different distilleries, everybody's got their analogy tool set. And I'm always trying to hear other people's and see, oh, we're doing a similar one, or man, I've never even thought of something in a different way. So I did notice that you had a pretty good set of them. But yes, the chili one's one I use heavily because especially as a finished brand, right? Like I can say, oh yeah, we got the peated character out in 2 weeks, but I ended up giving it a year because it really allowed that smoke to integrate with the spice of the rye. And we used a little bit of French oak, and I think it just all layered together really nicely. And had we dumped that after 2 weeks, I don't think it would have been the case.
Did you see any radical changes with it when you were proofing it?
Well, you're teeing me up for even as you can tell from the bonded, I always want to take an extra level of nerdy, especially with the distillery only ones, right? Because that allows people are in the distillery, we can educate in a way that we can't if it's being shipped to California or Poland or whatever. So what we did with this one, well, okay, this will actually allow me to bring it back around full circle. So the peated one was good and it was coming along nicely, but knowing that it was going to be potentially a follow-up to the Ball and Bond, which, we had pretty much unanimously positive reviews on, like it really, I think, opened people's eyes that, we were pushing even against our own boundaries. I was like, as much as I love a peated whiskey and as good as I think this whiskey is, it does not feel appropriate to follow up. I think it would be a letdown. And so that's when the 2 grain kind of came into play as I started looking through, high corn bourbon, what is that? Oh, it's 90% corn bourbon. And so then the story around it kind of became, I can do this double release. I love a double release because I can talk about each whiskey separately and then almost like a third set of talking points of how they relate to each other. And so the 2 grain was hyper local, right? 90% local corn, all Kelvin barrels. We actually partner with Louisville Water to do a cute little cut on it with their city water.
Fun.
They've trademarked city water. It's a whole thing in Louisville. So I had the local one, but that kind of shaped up because I thought it would be a good counterpoint to peated cask release, clearly international, Kentucky rye, but peated cask. And then to answer your question, we actually cut it using a technique out of cognac for the first cut, which is barrel aging water, like, Devil's Cut, obviously trademarked by a company here, but Petite O, and I think still Austin.
Very like an elevage kind of.
Yes, exactly. And so that one, back to the 2 grain being a accident, right? And you see what happens. This one also had an element of accident to it, in that I had so I put about 3 or 5 gallons in about 50 ex-rye barrels of water, sorry. And I had meant to do it for like 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and just see what happened, and potentially cut the tequila finish rye I mentioned earlier with that, if it turned out right. Miscommunication with the warehouse team. I thought they'd all been sent to Scotland. 10 months later, I got a picture of our new warehouse, and they're saying, hey, we're filling in the last ricks, but we had this one rick that already has barrels in it that says save for Owen. And I was like, what the hell is that? And I was like, oh shit, it's the water barrels. So 10-month barrel aged water inadvertently.
Were they skunky?
They were lovely.
Really?
That was my first thought. I was like, if it's not skunky, then it's going to be freaking wood chips,
it's gonna
wood
go
shavings.
Like one of 2 directions. It's going to be disgusting.
I should have brought a sample down. No, I'll have someone come up to Louisville.
Yeah.
Well, I think the reason it wasn't skunky is that it was 30% ABV. So it was like shelf stable in terms of ABV.
Yeah, you need a decent amount you have to fortify it.
And then kind of to the low entry proof conversation, I think this almost took it to a whole different level where like it was creamy and rounded and like lemon tart and like all these insane flavors. And I was just blown away. And it just so happened that the next rye product up was going to be the peated one. And I was like, oh shit, this all fits in perfectly. I got local on the 2 grain. I already got peated from Scotch. Let me add a second international influence through cognac. Like, how cool is that? And so it just works out beautifully, as things every so often tend to do. And together, those felt like an appropriate follow-up to the bottle and bond.
Wow. So cool.
Yeah, kind of wild.
I don't even know where to go from that, because like my head has been a little bit like it's just blown up. But switching gears, I mean, we were talking about all these new incredible things that you have produced between, the peat and the bottled and bond. But let's take it back to the OGs of Angels Envy, the rum finish, the port finish. There's a house style that has been developed with those products. It's what people know and understand, and it has carried Angel's Envy through the years. How are you interpreting that style? Are you keeping it as consistent as you can? Are you trying to find ways to improve upon it or introduce your own take as master distiller? Especially the rum finish, because that is such a special release that everyone hypes so much. And the world of rum is so big and open, and there's so many possibilities to play with rum.
Yeah, I think the best way I've heard this is that a person in the sort of position I'm in, or just, I guess, most broadly, like the whiskey making position, your job is to be the steward for the company. It's not to insert my ego, whatever else, right? So not to say I can't tweak production techniques, but really the job's not to imprint my own mark on these products that predate me walking in the door by 10, 12 years, right? Mm-hmm. They're popular for a reason. People like them. It would actually be, I think it'd be the wrong move for it to be like, nope, this is my version of it. And so, I think it's to be as egoless as possible in maintaining these products, changing techniques where we see the opportunity to do so, but especially as we scale, right? Because that's to the same topic as the bottle and bond. That's where you can run into problems that, this technique was more suited to like a craft level production, and now you need to be doing hundreds of thousands of cases of it. What are you doing? So I think that's one side of it, right? Is the core products to maintain them. And, obviously Triple Oak, and we have some other things out now under my watch that I can claim I ideated and executed. But certainly the port finish and the rum finish are their own entities, is what the brand is built on. But then we do yearly cask strength releases. We do single barrels. We do other high-end releases with all these different finishes. Like, that's my playground to do my own thing and tell my own story, just like all the ones we just talked about. But yeah, I mean, we're looking at, some higher end different rum things we can do. I did a cask strength rye when I first got to the company. That was my very first release with Angel's Envy. And so now looking at maybe doing that again with some different spread of rum barrels. Not too far in the future. I probably shouldn't go any more into depth than that. But yeah, we're not that far away from it. So I think that's more where I can flex some creative muscles. And then again, it's two sides of the same coin. Like it's creative in different ways. Creative of how you create continuity, and then creative in just the world's your oyster type thing.
Well, in the world's your oyster type thing, could you foresee Angel's Envy doing any American single malt or even just a malt whiskey?
I mean, the world's my oyster, of course. I will say that there are a lot of other new grain bills I have to show off before that is on the table. And certainly given my background and what I've spent a majority of my career doing, there won't be a malt out under our name until it is like perfect.
Yeah.
So I'm not in any rush to do that or even to make it, because I think there's a lot of other stories to tell and things to show off of what direction we're heading. I think that will eventually, or could eventually, be a piece of it. But again, it's not going to be anytime soon.
Yeah, interesting. So transitioning from, working in craft into being master distiller for one of the most recognizable legacy distillers in Kentucky right now that has international acclaim. And I asked this question to my buddy who was on the podcast a few episodes ago, Joe O'Sullivan, who runs Minden Mill.
Lovely, lovely human being.
Amazing human being. And I like to ask all of my friends who who will be receptive to the question, what does this new role of master distiller mean to you? And how are you interpreting it?
It means it means I'm uncomfortable. It means I would I always.
It means you're so busy at Kentucky Bourbon Festival.
Yeah, you saw that.
Yeah,
running around like a chicken with my head cut off. I will say, again, as somebody from Scotch originally, you probably know a no-brainer that my heroes often are from there. Mm-hmm. And so I always shout out Compass Box as my ride or die. And on whiskey technique predominantly, obviously, but I just have always loved that they've called themselves whiskey makers. If I were allowed to change my title, it would be tomorrow. It would just be whiskey maker. I've said it several times in the podcast already. So, because to me, it's like, okay, we can talk about distilling all day. I've run plenty of stills. Am I being honest? Do I run the still day to day at Angel's Envy? Absolutely not. Like that would frankly be a waste of my time. It'd be a waste of our production team's time. It would probably be dangerous. So I've made peace with it, right? Like I'm out on the road or I'm doing something else. Like I have to have complete trust with the team, right? They have to know I have their back. I have to know they have mine, and that's how we can function. And it took a little bit of an ego hit when I first got there and was like, oh yeah, well, I guess I'm not going to be doing this anymore. I'd still run the stills at Stranahan's right up till the end. So distilling very much front end, blending, as kind of alluded to, both at the end of my time at Stranahan's and definitely my time at Angel's Envy as a finished company. Most of what we do is blending. That's the back end, right? But whiskey making kind of encompasses the whole thing. I think it's the most holistic term you could have. I don't know. That's my ramble on job title, I guess.
Well, and you have such great, from what I've observed, because I saw you quite a bit at Kentucky Bourbon Fest, and you guys had such a great presence there, and people were coming up to you off the street and talking to you and interacting with you, and you were doing all this really cool education. And you seem to have such a personal approach with every single person who comes up to you in a way that I hadn't seen manifested in Angel's Envy before. Even with, you guys have the Whiskey Guardians and they're incredible ambassadors for you. Sure. But it was really, really cool to see a master distiller take the helm of this operation. And no, not saying that the Hendersons were not that, but you're such an approachable, charismatic, kind person who enjoys talking to people about what you do.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I think that is probably as responsible for the course I've been on as anything, right? Like not that long ago, I was a night distiller in Colorado, so I didn't talk to anybody. I was just running stills at 5 a.m., 6 a.m., going home and sleeping and coming back and doing it again. But it started out that they knew I liked talking about whiskey. They knew I had the background. Back to the analogy conversation. How do you break it? Like part of the most fun thing for me is talking to people that don't know anything about bourbon. I'm trying to see where their background is, what they come from, what analogies I can make, because if I can bring them into the fold, then that's the power of it, right? But yeah, I started doing engineering tours in Colorado just for the local Colorado School of Mines. And then that became, hey, do you want to do a few more tours? Like we got some VIPs coming in. And then when Rob eventually went to Blackened, that kind of allowed that they saw that at least had the front face or the ability to probably step up and do the front facing stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think, again, thank you for that. If somebody's going to spend money to do something with us, if they give a shit about if they're going to give me the time of day, like I owe it to them to do that, right? Like I owe it, if somebody's going to spend money on a dinner, if somebody's going to take a tour, like it would be a travesty for me to just walk by them and not even give them the time of day. So like I always try to have that in mind in any interaction, right? I've found myself in a very strange position where people seem to give a shit what I'm saying some of the time. And I don't think I should take that privilege lightly.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Do you foresee any, other than expanding the portfolio to include all of these really cool ideas that you have for Angel's Envy as it expands and as you expand kind of your market presence, do you see any other operational expansions happening, any innovations with warehousing or distilling, or any plans that you would like to see come to fruition in the next few years?
Well, it's happening right now. Actually, as of just a couple of weeks ago, we were tankering our new make out to our warehouses, and we just had a barreling and blending facility, massive facility, come online there.
Hell yeah.
Only part of it. So the first phase of it is that our new make's being tankered out there. Well, let me back up and put it another way. So every barrel to date that we've distilled is filled downtown, gets immediately rolled onto a truck.
Great facility, by the way.
Yeah. And we're going to have to reckon with this as it changes from a tour standpoint, because we're going to be missing a big chunk of what we've been able to show people to date. So it's not, there's always other ramifications to decisions and things we'll figure out. I have no doubt we'll do a good job of it. But yeah, right now the barrels get filled, immediately rolled onto a truck. Literally the truck is backed up to the barrel filling station. Mm-hmm. Those truck out to the warehouses. 5 years later, they come back. We dump, 100, 120 of those into a tank, filled port barrels. Those truck back out to the warehouses. 6 months later, they truck back. And again, 100 or so of those are dumped into a tank and then bottled, right? So that's
so much truck traffic.
Yeah, I've joked, and probably on another podcast at some point, but if Jeffersons can say aged on an ocean, we're aged on 71 going back and forth.
Jesus.
But yeah, so now, as of just a couple weeks ago, we are filling a tanker, so basically 3 fermenters worth, so 120 odd barrels worth. Is going to be is tankered straight out to our warehouse, so about 45 minutes away. It's in Henry County, basically about I tell people about halfway between Louisville and Cincinnati, and so all the barrel filling will take place out there. And then our second phase, which is not going to come online until probably June or July, is that the barrel dumping will actually take place out there. So we'll do all the blending of our core releases, because it's of releases as a certain scale. We'll still do the other ones downtown. But then basically the finished product, just a little bit above bottling proof, will come back downtown and go into tanks and then be bottled as it has been.
Oh man, that sounds like it's going to really streamline y'all's product.
Yeah,
I think more.
Yeah, I think there's going to be challenges with it as well, but I think overall it was a move that needed to happen for growth in the brand. But as I said, even just on a tour standpoint, a lot of the craftsmanship that we're physically able to show people is now going away. So what do you do with that?
Yeah.
Do you want to have a video? That doesn't quite seem good enough to me. But I mean, that's what even one of my points was. One, my special releases are at a scale so much smaller than what this facility is capable of. I'm going to be losing potentially 20, 30, 40% of my batches in pipe size alone. I'm sure they're dinky pipes by comparison to what you work.
No, but I mean, we tanker all of our stuff. So like what you're saying it feels very familiar, because I run tankers all day of distillate.
Yeah. So even, I think I was pitching that we absolutely need to keep the dump trough downtown and keep the capabilities of batching things downtown. And then, even if I'm only doing that a couple times a month, hopefully we can schedule special tours, whatever else around those. And then anyone who comes through the facility and sees barrels being dumped knows that they're seeing something special. I mean, we might not tell them exactly what it is, but I think there's still power to that. So yeah, like anything else, we'll figure it out as we go along.
Yeah. Would you keep your single barrel picks happening at the...
Yes. Yeah. And we have I should have said this, sorry. We have a separate bottling line for single barrel. Mm-hmm. So that'll run 5 or 6 single barrels a day,
nice.
4 days a week. And so all of that will remain downtown. So there's still something to show people, but the engine of the operation with the barrel fills and the barrel dumps will largely no longer happen there.
Do you think you'll ever add additional stills or anything like that moving forward too? Are there thoughts about that?
Yeah. And I mean, even with that facility coming online in Henry County, there was when the time comes, maybe that's 5 years from now, maybe that's 10 years from now, we'll just see, there's
what our headwinds look like.
Yeah. What are the headwinds of 5 years from
headwinds
now?
Are our favorite word in the industry right now.
Correction. Whatever word people want to put towards it. I think there was different thoughts of would it come downtown or would we do it out there since we already have the facility? And I don't think there's an answer today. I mean, we were open about, we purchased the parking lot across from the distillery, so there's a big opportunity for expansion there. But that could be in a tour sense, that could be an event space sense, bottling hall, distillery. So I think the pieces are there, and even if I had an answer today, it likely would be different a month from now, or certainly a year from now. So I think we will be ready to put another still in when the time comes, but I think we're still certainly a few years removed from even needing to think about it.
Yeah, that's just me being nosy, because my whole life has just been commissioning equipment. I like to know, are you going to go through the same things that I just went through?
I hope not.
It's so much fun, though.
Yeah, I know. It sounds like it. Yeah.
You get there. So as we begin to kind of wrap up our conversation, I know.
We can do another hour easy, right?
Yeah, for sure. But I guess your elevator pitch that I'm sure you have on hand, for those who think they know Angel's Envy from what it was for all the years before, and as you are taking it into this new era, what are kind of some of the key takeaways that you would want to tell that person that maybe tried it 8 years ago and is potentially wanting to revisit with some of these new things? Yeah,
I think a lot of the things I've made are partially targeted towards that person, right? We did the triple oak as a means of showing it's still a cask finish. I love hearing the more traditionalists is like, well, a double oaked whiskey isn't finished. And I'm like, well, it says finished on the bottle. What the fuck do you mean? Like, it says finished in a second oak barrel. Anyway, that's getting more into semantics, but it was basically, in my mind, still making a finished whiskey. We're not the first to use any of those oak varieties, right? Triple oak just refers to the fact that we finished 5-year-old bourbon, the same base bourbon as our port, but finished some in French oak barrels, some in Hungarian oak, some in chinkapin, fully made of each of those oak varieties, and then blended them back together after the fact. So not important to me to be the first to use an oak variety or anything for that matter, but still from a blending sense, we were able to make it feel like it was authentically ours and unique to us. So that using those finishing barrels was a way to, in my opinion, engage a more traditional bourbon audience while still having a level of uniqueness to it. And the same with the Bottle and Bond, right? We went through a 10-minute spiel of all this shit, but if it tasted bad, it doesn't matter, right? I think both of those products are good examples. Maybe the Bonded probably the most so. The first box to check is make a great tasting whiskey. Make a whiskey that you don't need to say a thing about, and the first thing somebody wants to do is pick it up and take a second sip or order another glass at the bar. Job one. Job two for me is, let me show you all this nerdy stuff. Like, this is why I did it. This is hopefully why I think it tastes good. And I think that to me are the types of products I'm trying to make. I want to have both. I want my cake and to eat it too. But I think that's what people are going to see. I think what's coming is, you sang Angel's Envy praises early on of like, you think everybody knows this brand. And I think that's the strength of it. Like, it is a very recognizable bottle. One of the first like urban distilleries, which has now become a more commonplace maneuver, especially as a lot of the craft places have come in. But the brand's only 15 years old.
And you've got a great advocacy program too.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and you build, I mean, that's, I think the traditional belief is you build belief in bars, right?
You build brands in bars.
Yes, you build brands in bars. So so I think that is, for me, I'm like, look, we have this recognition that really outpaces the history of what we've even been doing, right? So, you talk about the history of some of these things. And to me, yes, I get jealous when I see like, well, this is the first Jack Daniel's thing of this nature in 100 years. I'm like, that's awesome. That's a cool story, and it has authenticity to it. But I also remind myself a lot of times that history can be constraining, and I don't view that we have nearly any of that. In fact, by getting the unfinished out, I think we kind of broke or kicked the one door open that we had been constraining ourselves with. So I think that's what people will see. They'll still see things when I'm looking at innovation, if I'm doing my job right, our innovation should feel like a natural extension of what's going on. We'd never released a cask strength rye before I got there, but why hadn't we? Right? We've been doing a cask strength bourbon for 12 years before I walked in the door. So it's like, oh, cool, that's new. But, that feels like something that could have been here for a while, right? So that's what I'm looking at. And I think for us, you'll see that as a 15-year-old company, we'd really, as you very clearly said, like a port finished bourbon and a rum finished rye. That's all we really had. Even our single barrels, our cask strengths were variations of port finishing. So what people are going to see in the future is, I think, what I want to do is just show a greater degree of intentionality behind what we're doing front to back. So like the first shoe is only really dropped. Really, we've shown people cask finishing over the last 15 years. I think what you'll see, and then maybe this goes back to the blender distiller whiskey maker conversation. What people have seen is the blender side, right? The finishing side. What they'll see coming up is we'd hopefully design this grain bill already knowing what finishing cask it was going into, that sort of thing, right? Like, so I think the second shoe of all the other fermentation, the very first thing I put down was a fermentation-based product, right? And it's only 3 years old now, right? So people aren't going to see that for many, many years, but that's all what's coming. Most of which will be cask finish, but then I think it'll showcase, the cask finish will be a way of showcasing why we did a grain bill a certain way, why we fermented a certain way, why we ran the still a different way. And I think that's the massive big piece is still yet to come.
Great answer. Vote for Owen.
Well,
Owen for president.
I don't know about that. No, don't do that.
No. Not master distiller, whiskey maker.
There we go.
Yeah.
You got it.
No, I think that's a great note for us to end on. I was like sitting here like feeling like, yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I can't thank you enough for schlepping out to my house.
Happy to schlep.
And bringing gifts with you.
Of course.
And having such a great conversation and learning a little bit more about your process and all the thought that you put into this, which I already had an idea of, but it's really cool just to hear it over and over again because it never gets old, you know? So as we are wrapping up, quick reminder that for more than 30 years, G&D Chillers has had the proven solution for distilleries, and you should visit them today at gdchillers.com for all of your chilling needs, because chillers are important.
They are.
It's really bad if you have one that does not work.
I have in the past.
I have in the past too. It's the worst thing.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
It's late July. Your fermenter's at 110 degrees.
Your glycol's failing.
Yeah.
And you're just fighting for your life. Yep. If you've enjoyed this podcast, go to spiritsanddistilling.com and sign up for our free newsletter that features news stories every week from some of the best writers and distillers in the distilling world. Oh, and if people want to learn more or taste for themselves some of the results of the projects that you've been working on, how can they dig a bit deeper?
Oh, man. I almost don't even want to plug this, but I have a really bad dad Instagram.
It's a great Instagram. Don't listen to him.
Oven_mitten, which somebody finally posted a picture of a bottle I'd signed and was
you explained it to me and it's fucking brilliant. Why is your name Oven Mitten?
My name is Owen Martin, so it goes back to childhood. I had a friend's mom who had an accent, and that was the way she said my name, and so I've always used that. But there was pressure early on to make it a more professional Instagram, and I luckily just held out, and now I think it's too late to change it back. But you'll see baby pictures, mostly whiskey content, some baby pictures and dog pictures on there. But yeah, angelsenvy.com, their Instagram. The normal channels. I guess if we're going to draw a line back to what we're talking about, if you get an opportunity to do a tasting with us, I promise you, I am here for any and all questions. And I think we do a pretty good job with those sort of things. So, if you're able to come see us at KBF, or even if you're coming through Louisville, you can always drop me a line either on that Instagram or on my LinkedIn, whatever. I'm not hard to find. Because I promise you, I will shoot a response to you. That might be a dangerous deal to make. I don't know what the listener volume is here, but I always try to have a pretty good degree of availability. So reach out directly. Why not? Great distillery tour too. Awesome. They do a nice job. Yeah, a lot of fun visiting. The one time I went, the girl let me taste some new make, and this might have to be edited out depending on how your comps do. She was jokingly pouring it, and I took a knee to take a layback. Sure. Definitely got a face full of new make. It was glorious. I've seen it in different ways. I somehow got looped into doing a bachelor party sometime in the last year or so. And
Yeah.
it kind of went in one direction or the other. I won't go into more detail than that. But yeah, you know, every now and then you get a bourbon bro or somebody who thinks they're
He just wants to be baptized. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, baptism's fine. I think I'd prefer to do that than like take a shot of 140 proof stuff. So, but if somebody...
It's like waterboard me.
Yeah, I was like, I'll do something. I'll take you up on that Malort shot that you offered earlier. So
I got barrel-aged Malort in this house.
Yeah.
We will be back in another 2 weeks with yet again another in-depth distilling conversation for you. Thank you guys so much for tuning in with us tonight, and cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by Spirits and Distilling for those who love to make and drink great spirits. Join our free newsletter today at spiritsanddistilling.com for pragmatic, technical, and creative distilling stories in your inbox every week. Sign up now at spiritsanddistilling.com or click on the link in the show notes.